Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to give folks just a couple of minutes here to get settled into the system, and then we'll start here in about 30 seconds or so. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Willett, Communications Specialist and Ojibwe member of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa with the Intertribal Council of Michigan. Welcome to the Intertribal Council of Michigan's webinar series titled Healthy Native Families. This webinar activity today is titled Smoke-Free Laws on Tribal Lands. This technical assistance webinar is being hosted by the Intertribal Council of Michigan, which offers technical assistance and resources for commercial tobacco and cancer prevention and control throughout Indian country and the Indian Health Service Clinical Support Center. Your presenter today is Clinton Isham, Tribal Relations Consultant, and works with the American Nonsmokers Rights Foundation. We're pleased to offer continuing education credits for participants in this webinar today. No commercial interest support was used to fund this activity. This activity is designated one contact hour for social workers, nurses, and physicians. To obtain a certificate of continuing education, you must be registered for the course, participate in the webinar in its entirety, and submit a completed post-webinar survey. I'll be sending webinar surveys out later on after today's presentation, but also keep an eye out. You may receive an email from Zoom within 24 hours with the same email link as well. At the conclusion of this activity, the healthcare team will be able to examine the current landscape of commercial tobacco prevention, control, and policy initiatives in tribal communities, identify key components of tribal policy planning for tobacco control, and effectively utilize the Smoke-Free Tribal Policy Guide developed by the American Nonsmokers Rights Foundation to support the development and implementation of smoke-free policies in tribal communities. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please type them into the question box on your Zoom panel. Questions will be answered during the last few minutes of today's webinar. Thank you, and now at this time, I will toss it over to Clinton.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to do a share screen. And then, okay. Can you see the presentation?
Yep. And our foundation applied for 2 years funding.
Yes. So we'll start from the beginning. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Clinton Isham. I'm never not nervous when I do a presentation, even though I do presentations maybe 10 or 20 times a year. I'm just trying to fix this. Okay. So my name is Clinton Isham. I currently live in Chicago, Illinois, and I serve the Tribal Relations Consultant for the American Nonsmokers Rights Foundation, which is a nonprofit out of Berkeley, California. Been with A&R Foundation as a consultant for around 5 years. And before that, I worked for Great Lakes Intertribal Council of Michigan, which is kind of like I think a sister organization to Intertribal Council of Michigan. And I served the 11 tribes in Wisconsin doing commercial tobacco prevention and policy work as the Wisconsin Native American Tobacco Network director. And I was there for about another 5 years. I'm also from Lac du Flambeau. I'm a citizen of Lac du Flambeau, Ojibwe, which is where Great Lakes Intertribal Council is located. So when I typically tell my friends and family what I do for work, what I do for American Nonsmokers Rights Foundation, I typically start with what A&R Foundation does on a national level as an organization. So they're a public health nonprofit that started, I think, in the late 70s, and they were the organization that helped lead one of the first campaigns for a smoke-free airline that came out of California. And since then, they've helped individual local governments, cities, and state governments become smoke-free. So if you look at this map that's on the presentation, you see all these different colors and little dots. So what this represents is different stories from coalitions throughout the United States. So a coalition, whether it was directly within a city government or a state government, they had the idea to initiate a smoke-free policy. They wanted smoke-free air for their community, for the workers that were exposed to secondhand smoke, whether it was in a bar or airplane or casino or what have you. And what A&R does is, A&R Foundation is we help these coalitions become successful by supporting them with resources, TA, and funding. And so whatever it is that a community would need so that they're successful in implementing the smoke-free policy, organizations like A&R Foundation are there to support in that transition. Right now, one of the big things that A&R Foundation is doing is they're working on closing it's a smoking loophole currently in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So right now there are partial smoke-free laws in those two states, but there are certain entities that are exempt from that policy, mainly commercial casinos. And so something that A&R Foundation is helping with is the efforts being led right now by an organization called CEASE, and that consists of casino employees that are against smoking within the casinos. And so this organization is doing a lot of really great work, a lot of really great advocacy right now in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania, trying desperately to close this loophole so that their workspace is 100% smoke-free. And that's something that A&R and multiple other organizations are working on currently. And also, tons of other organizations as well. And so think about, I don't know if people on this call, if you have experience working on a smoke-free policy campaign within your state or within your city or tribe. Just think about Wisconsin for a second and what it took, right? Like for that entire state to become smoke-free. I know we're not in Wisconsin, we're in Michigan right now. But it took a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of people that came together to, make that happen for a statewide level, right? So all of those things, that energy, that time, those resources, that funding, that's needed on a tribal level as well for when we're doing this work within tribal communities, working with individual coalitions, working with tribes, working with organizations to ensure that people are protected from secondhand smoke. And so that's something that I do with A&R Foundation, and of course with the help from tons of other organizations. I've worked closely with Mike and a lot of others on this call, Intertribal Council of Michigan, for many years on a number of different campaigns and supported each other. But what I'm getting at is for policies to get passed on tribes, right? Like, think about all the effort that it took for this map to be what it is, right? That same amount of energy and time and things and resources is needed in our tribal communities. And if there's one thing that I would want to relay in this presentation is to help equip people on this call to make that happen, whether you're working directly with a tribe or if you're working with a non-tribal entity and your goal is to get that non-tribal entity to become stakeholders to, work with individual tribes in supporting smoke-free policies. So again, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of things that need to be done. And one person can't be responsible for one region or one state or all of the United States, or Mike can't just be responsible for making Michigan go smoke free. I can't be responsible for making all of Wisconsin tribes go smoke free. We need the collective energy from all these resources, all these partners within the states to help and to get behind the advocacy work that we're doing and that we're trying to do in our communities. And to figure out how to, to serve tribes the best way that we can is, the main thing is we just need to be adaptive in our approach to commercial tobacco prevention and control. We need to help our funders and the organizations that are, working with us to understand that tribes have a pre-existing relationship with tobacco. Some tribes, right, have a pre-existing relationship with tobacco. And because of that, because of our relationship with tobacco that is, pre-colonial, the approach in our methods is it looks much different, right? It won't match the same thing that they did at a state level in New York or on a state level in California, right? And even working with individual tribes like in Michigan, one thing that worked in one tribe won't work in the other tribe, right? Like, we have to be able to adapt our approach. And in order to do that, it's we have to be able to sit and learn from these individual communities and learn more about their individual and unique tribal sovereignty, culture, and history. And so, yeah, let me go to the next slide. So the one thing that I've learned from, doing this work for, oh God, 10 years now, and, especially over the past couple of years, is that tribal communities and tribal organizations, they're ready for these policies now, right? If let's try our hand raising thing. Raise your hand in here if you know somebody that's been affected by smoking related illness or cancer, somebody that has died or somebody that has been impacted by smoking related disease. Are there any hands up? I actually can't see the hands.
Looks like about 8, 9 hands went up.
Oh, okay. So that's a lot. So one thing that I've learned from this work, right, is that our communities are ready for this. Our communities want this, right? We want this. We want to do these policies and they're ready. If you guys know about the story of the man on the slide, this is a picture of Nathan Moose, who is the CDC spokesperson. And Nathan Moose worked most of his life at a tribal casino that allowed smoking. Nathan Moose did not smoke commercial tobacco or use tobacco recreationally. He was a powwow dancer. He was a family person, and he advocated for smoke-free policies and was, a great advocate that worked closely with the CDC. And Moose died of lung cancer related to, being exposed to secondhand smoke. And, Nathan's story is Nathan's story, it hits so close to home because a lot of us, we share this story, right? Like we have similar stories in our communities and our families of things like this that have happened in our communities because of different public health policies. And so one thing that we want to do is, together, all of us on this webinar here and the larger group, national coalitions that we work with throughout the United States is to, make sure that that these stories, that these stories come to an end, that we're not having these stories being repeat stories like Nathan Moose of, contracting lung cancer because he was exposed to secondhand smoke at his workplace because, he needed to earn a living for his family. And so over the years, from, doing this work and being on calls, and especially over the pandemic, working with so many great partners, one thing that we have done as a direct result of hearing from tribes that they're ready for smoke-free policies is we created the national coalition called Reclaim Sacred Tobacco. And this coalition is, we meet once every 2 months. And we first started to meet back in November of 2022. And what we wanted to do was simply, just to create a space for tribal public health workers that were working in commercial tobacco control. I don't know if any of you have been to the Tribal Commercial Tobacco Prevention Conference held typically by ACAF, American Indian Cancer Foundation. They typically have their in-person conference in Minneapolis once every 2 years. But if you've ever been to that or any other, coalition or meeting where like-minded people are working together to kind of achieve similar goals, right? That feeling of like camaraderie and people understand what you're doing. That's kind of what we wanted to create with Reclaim Sacred Tobacco, was to create a space for that feeling and for that energy so that we can come together as a collective and support each other through this work that we're doing in tribal communities. And so this call that we have is co-hosted by myself and also with Herschel Clark, who's with the Black Hills Center for American Indian Health. And Herschel Clark was instrumental in helping pass the Heirs Life Act in 2021 with the Navajo Nation. And so it was me and him that kind of co-host this call and have worked together to build Reclaim Sacred Tobacco to kind of what to what we do today. Some of the early projects that we started with Reclaim Sacred Tobacco, early on, there was just a small group of us. And one of the main issues that a lot of tribal communities that were on the call had wanted to resolve was they wanted to increase their access to traditional tobacco. And of course, right, we can't do that perfectly, or we might not be doing it. We can't always like do it. I don't know if there's a right way to do this, because our tobacco, our sema, it's a plant that's different in many different areas. So to Ojibwe people, our tobacco plant that we use may look different, compared to what Oneida Nation of Wisconsin uses, right? Because Oneida Nation they migrated from the East Coast. And so, and their tobacco may look, the actual species of tobacco may look different, versus what Lakota people use, and so on and so on. And so we had a lot of conversations on how we were going to like phrase what tobacco meant, and how we were going to phrase, increasing access to tobacco. And so we came to a consensus of just calling the project the seed starter kit. And so what we did was we ended up finding some seeds online that were simply called 1,000-year-old tobacco. And this is from a website called Raven Song. And we provided all the materials for individuals to start their own mini greenhouse, and just have that experience of growing a type of traditional tobacco, so that in hopes of, if that community has access to a strain of their traditional tobacco that's associated with their stories, that they can, use that and start growing their own traditional tobacco that's specific to their community. Long story short, this was a really cool project. A lot of communities had called us and were looking for seed starter kits. And I think this is something that, if there's any community health representatives on today, this is a really cool project that you could do with kids if you're, working with kids. I do this all the time when I'm on the road and working in communities. I make it a part of my presentation just to have people have the experience of like growing their own type of tobacco seed. And this involves like transplanting it and things like that. But what we did was created like this mini infographic to show people kind of step by step and what they can do to increase traditional tobacco in their community. Another thing that we do through Reclaim Sacred Tobacco is we provide surveys, and we design surveys for communities. So surveys are a great tool when discussing smoke-free policies with tribal casinos, because many times the information that is coming to tribal leaders from the tribal casinos, it does not include tribal perspectives towards smoking. And so I'm just saying this because I've seen it, many, many times and over again, where our tribal leaders who, they want what's best for their tribal community. They are in support of public health initiatives. They, they care and love their tribal community, right? And at the end of the day, I've seen it so many times where our tribal leaders are in support of smoke-free policies. I've been in tribal council meetings with casinos, and our tribal leaders, vocally support smoke-free policies. But many times with our tribal casinos, they're operated by non-native and non-tribal members that, either manage or operate our tribal casinos. And their only focus is to stick with the status quo. And according to that perspective, right, that non-tribal perspective, that outsider perspective, according to them, gambling and smoking go hand in hand. They're concerned about the bottom line. They say that the best ventilation machines are going to work and sift everything out. Another thing that we'll always hear from that side also is that machines in smoking areas outcompete other machines in non-smoking areas. Have you guys ever heard of that before? Does anybody want to explain why that is? You could just go up mute if you'd like to say anything.
Hey, Clinton, I think that everybody's muted right now.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. Okay, so again, a lot of times I see that in surveys that are developed by casinos that go to tribal leaders and go to, management and things, they say that machines in smoking areas outcompete machines in non-smoking areas. And if you ever go to a casino that allows smoking, the non-smoking area is always tucked way in the back of the casino, where you could barely find it. It has a fraction of the machines, and it has none of the machines that people want to play, right? Doesn't have like the really cool, Buffalo machines or Wizard of Oz machines or things like that, right? All the fancy, really cool machines that people want to play are on the main floor in front of the casino where they allow smoking. So of course the non-smoking machines are not going to make that much more money. But anyways, so these are arguments, right? That casino managers will typically make, and the data, it's old, it's outdated, and when we equip our tribal leaders with this type of information that comes from tribal perspectives, that comes from tribal citizens, that come from tribal employees that care about smoke-free policies, that care about the health of other people, when we equip this type of information to our tribal leaders, it really matters. They see these types of things, and they act on it, And so this is just an example of a community that we've worked with in California to help engage with their tribal leadership. There was a tribal casino that reverted back to smoking. And so we worked with the community to collect data, and then, create some highlights from our survey to share with tribal leadership and what the community wanted in regards to smoking in casinos. Oh, this survey, just to highlight one of these things on here. So we had a total amount of around 2,136 people that responded to the survey. And around 10% of the survey was tribal people. But we asked people in the survey, what's the number one factor in how you decide to visit a casino? And so we ask questions like, is it distance? Is it free play? Is it payout ratio? Is it because it allows smoking? Is it because it doesn't allow smoking, right? We asked all these different questions. The number one choice was that the patrons wanted 100% smoke-free gaming. And that was followed by cleanliness. And then the third was free play. So this is coming from casino patrons. And so this is really, compelling data that tribal leaders, they will respond to. So another thing that I want to point out about the survey was that we created these infographics to help people to take the survey. And so what we did was we shared these assets or infographics online through social media and also through email lists. But the one thing that we provided was a QR code for individuals to take the survey through their smartphones if they wanted to. And so I don't know if you guys are familiar with QR codes, but all you do is you open up your camera and you point at this QR code and a link will come up. And so out of this 2,000 respondents that did the survey, almost 85% were done through the QR code. Were done on people's smartphones. So if you're doing any type of survey, right, whether it's on smoking or not, you want people to take it. This is one thing I'm going to start suggesting to people is put a QR code, have people, give people the option to complete the survey on their smartphone. Lastly, what we do on Reclaim Sacred Tobacco calls, we discuss policy steps with different guest speakers. So we invite speakers on that have experience with changing policy or implementing smoke-free policy within their tribal community. And we try to understand, the steps that they took to be successful. So for example, we've had like Herschel Clark on, and he talked about the steps that they took to enact the Heirs Life Act. We had Jay Macedo, who is with the Yurok tribe in California. And we had them talk about the steps they took to initiate that policy. I don't know if you guys ever heard of the Yurok Comprehensive Commercial Tobacco Policy. I think it's called their Traditional Tobacco Responsibility Act. I think that's what it's called. If you look for it online, it is really cool, very comprehensive. It has language on like littering tobacco, because they want to, stop waste from going into their water systems. But I worked closely with Jay Macedo in the past. And another thing that's just really cool about this work, right, is like we all learn from each other. I know for sure, like when Jay Macedo was working on their housing policy, they took a lot of information from Sault Ste. Marie. And when they were working on their enforcement language, they took a lot of information from the Heirs Life Act, their smoke-free policy. And so the one thing that we try to do when we're listening to guests talk about the policy steps or the steps that they took is we try to parallel it to our own smoke-free model that we've created, and that we use on the calls for, and that we also use for training purposes. And so what you're looking at here is an example of the smoke-free tribal policy model that we developed at A&R Foundation. And again, we use this just on Reclaim Sacred Tobacco calls to parallel steps that communities took. And also what this is really designed for is for training purposes to help individual tribal communities think about what type of smoke-free policy they want, write that policy to detail and then implement the smoke-free policy. And how I created this model was simply listening over the past 10 years, all these different tribal communities that, I've worked with in the past. And what I found was like each community, right, whether it was working with Ho-Chunk Gaming Madison or Eastern Band Cherokee Indians, each community, they had like a step they took, and a lot of the steps were similar in how they approached policy development within their tribal communities. And so what I did was just simply kind of wrote that model down. And the first step, it starts with understanding tribal community. And this really is just, about working, learning about the tribal history, sovereignty, and government of individual communities before you're engaged with them. Before you actually work with the tribal community, you should really understand, all facets of history, culture, and sovereignty, that is unique to that community. The second step is community outreach. And what this does is it helps people think about how to engage with the coalition, how to get that coalition to support smoke-free policy, and then how to get that coalition to then be transparent with the community. So it goes into then developing a communication plan so that your policy ideas are they're communicated effectively to the community, because that's something that tribal leaders are going to want to know, it's the first question that they're going to ask is the community on board, right? And so the first two steps, again, it's about getting the community on board, building trust within the community and within the coalition. Step 3 is smoke-free tribal policy development. This is really, once you have the community on board and you have your stakeholders, you're now, working on developing a detailed policy plan from start to finish. And that takes a lot of work, right? You're going to be in a lot of meetings, editing and looking at different ideas, looking at what enforcement means. Are you going to have fines? Are you not going to have fines? There's a lot of different things in here that has to be considered. And then policy introduction. There's many ways that a tribal policy can be introduced. Is it going to be through a health committee? Is it going to be directly with a casino manager or the casino committee? Is it going to be with the tribal council? And then also when it's in, the legislature, it's being considered by tribal government, what are some of the things that you can do to ensure that that policy is going to be successful? And so, again, what these steps do is we work with individual tribal communities to come up with these different scenarios, and we come up with, all the things that it will take in order for a policy to be successful. And then the last is implementation and evaluation, of course. And this is a lot like a conventional policy model, if anybody's wondering. So just to share some really good news about the Smoke-Free Tribal Policy Guide and also Reclaim Sacred Tobacco is we applied for funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to support our work through Reclaim Sacred Tobacco. And so we were awarded 2 years of funding, mainly to, support ongoing Reclaim Sacred Tobacco meetings, and then to provide Reclaim Sacred Tobacco members with funding, technical assistance, and resources. And so this includes things like developing surveys, collecting data, developing infographics and maps, providing technical assistance, such as, coalition building, helping with communication plans, things like that. And then also a direct funding component. And then the third part of the grant is creating an advisory board for Reclaim Sacred Tobacco, mainly because, we're going to be do direct funding, and we didn't want like all the decisions that, for supporting, for funding communities just to come from me or just to come from Herschel. And so we wanted to create kind of like an accountability measure, so that, or some sort of like leadership measure to help with those decisions and to help, keep Reclaim Sacred Tobacco on its feet. And so the grant, we worked with Black Hills Center for American Indian Health. And again, I talked about part of the grant is just to provide ongoing support. And then this is kind of the news that I wanted to share, was that the second component of the grant, and this is mainly looking into year 2, is we're wanting to do what we are going to have a direct funding mechanism for tribes that are either have already initiated smoke-free policies, or that have or want to be in the process of developing smoke-free policies. So if you're a tribal community and you already have a policy that's in place, and you need funding for, say, signs or something else that will help with, continued implementation or evaluation, we'll have a pot of money individually for that, for whatever activity that is. And that's going to be a rapid response component of the funding. So it's going to be, quickly cut the check in order to make that one thing happen. And then the larger component of direct funding is going to be in the form of providing the Smoke-Free Tribal Policy Guide training. And so the guide, and we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides because it's very much related to initiating smoke-free policy in tribes. But what we wanted to do was be able to work with 1 or 2 or 3 communities and helping them come up with their own unique smoke-free policy plan, right? Like having them write what is going to work for them, right? Because we're all different tribal communities. We have our own unique approaches. And so what we're going to be doing is providing a larger chunk of direct funding for communities that are interested in developing the Smoke-Free Tribal Policy Guide or developing a plan, Smoke-Free Tribal Policy Plan, and be committed to implementing the plan, right? And so it's really exciting. Right now, we're in the process of kind of building this advisory board so that we know, what the criteria is for issuing funding and providing resources and things like that. And so we're in this process right now. And as more information is available, I definitely will share it with Mike so he could share it out to the Intertribal Council of Michigan site. And if your community needs funding, we will have, some available for your policy. So let's talk about briefly, maybe for the next, what time is it? 10 minutes, how the Smoke-Free Tribal Policy Guide works. And I talked about it's 5 steps, right? Understanding tribal community, development, and then looking at writing your policy, policy introduction, and then evaluation. So what each step starts with, right? If you're looking at step 1 in the policy guide, it starts with like an overarching topic in what your organization or your community should kind of focus on. It's like a micro focus, like let's focus on this part. And so that topic leads you through a number of questions and tasks that can help you then kind of recognize a goal, an overall goal that's related again to the step. And so this may sound confusing. And so for this purpose, right, we have understanding tribal community, and your topic is Indian country and tribal communities. And so there will be a number of questions and tasks that help you. The overall goal is to recognize the past, and the present contributions of Indigenous peoples. So this is the goal that you're trying to get to, right? These are the questions and tasks that will help you get there. So let's go over what this looks like. Again, so we're starting here with step 1, understanding tribal community. We have our topic, which would be tribal land in existence. And there's a number of different topics within the Smoke-Free Tribal Policy Guide to help guide different users. And the questions in here that are in here is, just simple things that people can ask themselves. Or if you're working with the non-tribal partner, you're working with a funder, these are just things that you can work with, as a coalition or as a group to, come to an understanding of how tribal communities work, right? So some of the questions in here is like, do you currently work or reside on ancestral homelands of Indigenous peoples? How many state, federal recognized tribes are located near you? And so these are some of the things that are on this resource, and it gives you different examples and how you can do research and how you should, some of the ways that you can come to understanding tribal land in existence. So one thing that on the Smoke-Free Tribal Policy Guide that we kind of help guide users with is just looking at maps, right? Simply looking at a map. So through basic internet research, let's say I'm a funder and I want to work with the tribes in Wisconsin, right? One thing that if I'm working on the Smoke-Free Tribal Policy Guide, if I have this guide in front of me, it's going to tell me just to look at a map of tribes in Wisconsin. And so if I'm looking at this map, this is just a basic, looks like current reservations in Wisconsin. And so some of the things that I'm learning from this right away is that there are 11 tribes in Wisconsin, that some of these tribes are kind of scattered all over the place, right? So why is that? Why are these tribes scattered like this versus, some of these tribes not scattered? And so through the tribal policy guide, right, we delve into these conversations through the training and through the guide, and we come to conclusions of, why is Ho Chunk Nation, why is St. Croix broken out into different, communities? What happened? And where do we find that? We find that in our treaties, right? We find that in federal policy when we look at these different things. And when we understand those things, right? Like when we look into that and when we come to understanding that, it helps tremendously when we're at a point of working with the community and we want to initiate a smoke-free policy, right? All those things matter. Understanding these things matter when we're at a place of initiating a smoke-free policy within a community. And so another thing that we look at through the guide book is we have people look at maps, pre-colonial maps, right? Maps pre-colonization of the same area. And so this resource is through nativeland.ca. And so this is, again, the same map of Wisconsin, outline of Wisconsin area. And these are the tribes that were here prior to colonization. And so we have our, our coalition or the people that we're working with, put these side by side and consider the differences between both of them. What can we learn now from looking at these two maps? One thing that I see right away that is pretty interesting or noticeable, right, is Oneida is not here, right? There's no Oneida here. And also, there are a bunch of tribes up here. Like, are these individual tribes or are these bands? And it looks like if you're looking on this map, it'll show that this was Ojibwe territory all up here. And so if we look into this deeper, right, we'll learn and understand that there was a number of treaties that took place that then, broke up a lot of Ojibwe territory into individual reservations. And so when there's somebody, if you're working with somebody that has no prior knowledge of working with tribes, right, they might think there's a tribe called Bad River, right? It's like, or the people are called Bad River. That's not the case, right? This is a band of Lake Superior Ojibwe. This is there's a reason why these are broken up into bits and pieces here too, right? And so when we look at treaties, we understand that. When we look at these different maps, we can come to that conclusion and come to understand that. And one thing that I want to point out about this too, why this is important, because we talk about in the Smoke-Free Tribal Policy Guide, the differences in tribal culture and medicine. So it goes through a number of different topics. I won't go through this right now, but I want to leave time for questions. But one thing that is important to consider when you're doing this research, when you're doing this work to understand tribal communities, is tobacco looks different in a lot of different tribal communities. And I said earlier that Oneida Nation of Wisconsin is actually from the East Coast. And so when working in Wisconsin on tribal policy development or commercial tobacco control, right? And say you want to work with traditional healers or people that's working, traditional people that are working with tobacco in these communities. If I did my research, right, and I followed this and I came to an understanding that, hey, Oneida may be different culturally, like fundamentally, than a lot of these other tribes, right? As we know, a lot of Ojibwe tribes are patrilineal, right? A lot of the men are the ones that grow tobacco, that handle tobacco, that talk about Asema, right? But that's not the case in Oneida. That's not the case in Stockbridge, Munsee, which is another East Coast tribe, right? The females in these communities are the ones that take on those leadership roles for tobacco. So if I was to find somebody that was working in that area in those communities, I would find a female, and it might not be me that's the appropriate person to ask those questions, right? So that's like things that we can learn simply by looking at these two maps, you guys. And so again, this smoke-free tribal policy guide is all about helping people understand, all about helping people come to an understanding of, going back to the, oops, to help people come to an understanding of what, tribal community is. And yeah, I think I have a bunch of other slides, but I want to leave some time for questions, and I want to go here. And this is a QR code again of our, this will lead you to our registration site for Reclaim Sacred Tobacco Calls if you just want to be on the mailing list, or you want to join our next call, which will be in January 2025. Please scan this QR code and just register through Zoom. It's similar to the link that you followed for registering for this webinar. It'll take you to one directly for Reclaim Sacred Tobacco. And oh, and one thing I wanted to point out is I understand that Sault Ste. Marie tribe implemented a smoke-free policy for their casinos recently. Let's say big congratulations. Like that's really awesome, especially if any of you, work directly on that policy. We would love maybe if someone that worked on that or that can talk about it would want to come on Reclaim Sacred Tobacco Call and, share their experiences or talk about it. Because again, like we have people from all over the states that come on that are working on this, right? Like we have people in California and Oklahoma that are working with their casinos right now to help it go smoke free. And when we share our stories and we come together, on these calls, and it really makes a difference. It creates impact. It has impact, and I think what Sault Ste. Marie did is really amazing, and it will have a lot of ripple effects, in the near future.
All
Should I
right.
end the slideshow?
Well, you can keep the message up there and maybe your
Okay.
contact information, Clinton. Thank you very much for the presentation. You did a fantastic job, and I love looking at the maps. That's one of the things that I really love, and seeing how things were far different a long time ago versus today. Especially seeing as how you got some East Coast tribes that are in Wisconsin, and how some of the Ojibwe tribes are a bit more fragmented today and stuff. So I really liked how you walked us through that. So if anybody has any questions for Clinton, there is a Q&A box that should be on your Zoom platform, possibly next to the show captions or raise hand icons on the bottom of your window there. If you have any questions, please type them in there. We'll reserve these last 5 minutes or so for questions. But if I don't see any pop up, we'll go ahead and shut this down early. And then just to kind of give some folks some time to type a question in there. We will be sending out an archive of the webinar, but just to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit, I am on the road at the moment in a hotel, and hotels are notorious, of course, for having not the best internet when it comes to sending large files up and down, up to the cloud and back. So I'm going to work on trying to get the archive up on the website within the next week. If you can give me until Wednesday next week, I should have that up for sure. And if anybody is looking for certificates, any nurses, doctors, social workers, or anybody else that just wants to document that they attended the event, please fill out the evaluation. I'll send out an email after the presentation today. And go ahead and fill out the evaluation with your contact information and all that fun stuff in there. Let us know how we did. Let Clinton know how we did. We'll go ahead and share the results of that with him too. And we'll go ahead and get you guys set up with your continuing education credits here. We have a question here in the Q&A box that says, what kind of policy verbiage did you use for protecting ceremonial rights for tobacco usage when implementing these needed non-smoking policies?
Um, well, it depends on, I guess, the tribal community. Um, I know, like, specifically with Air's Life, their smoke-free policy, mainly like it will include language on differentiating commercial tobacco versus recreational tobacco. And they'll have one thing that they've done recently as an add-on to their Heirs Life Act was they amended their tax excise for commercial tobacco products. So typically that tobacco tax, I don't know where it went to originally, but I think Sault Ste. Marie tribe does this, right? Where they fund their commercial tobacco prevention coordinator or somewhat of the commercial tobacco tax. Something that Navajo Nation did was they amended it to fund their traditional healers. And so with the commercial tobacco funding sales tax, they're actually using that to kind of, in a way, right, fight back and use that to fund their traditional tobacco and their traditional healers. And so I guess it looks different in a lot of communities. And when working on your smoke-free policy plan, when you're working with your community and your coalition to develop this detailed plan, that's where that language comes out. And what is tobacco in your community, right? What's the plant called? How is it going to be protected? What's the language that you're going to want to use to help uphold and protect that cultural plant? And so whether it's within Eastern Band Cherokee, Yurok, I've seen language specific to their tobacco and a lot of their policies. And again, a big part of that is just differentiating the types of tobacco, the traditional tobacco and the recreational tobacco. And they'll actually define what their traditional tobacco is and why it's meaningful for them and how it's meaningful for them. And so if you want more information, you could reach out to me and I could send you some policy language where it'll show that type of information in it.
Thank you, Clinton. This other person here says, not a question, but thank you so much for being here. A very insightful presentation. So just a nice compliment on your today. Well, it is 3:59 Eastern. So with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. Again, if anybody would like a certificate for their nursing or social worker or just a certificate saying that you attended the event, fill out the evaluation. I will send that email out here in just a short. You'll also get another email from Zoom tomorrow So if you didn't see mine, you'll see one from Zoom. And then if anybody that you know, any colleagues or friends missed today's presentation, I will make sure to have the webinar archive put up on our websites no later than Wednesday next week. So it'll probably be sooner, but just give myself a little extra time. It'll probably be by Wednesday next week. So with that, thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to Clinton for presenting today. Thank you to Heather Medicine Bear for working to plan and coordinate today's event. And thank you to all of you for attending today's presentation. And with that, Chimagwitch, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Have yourselves a great rest of your day. Stay safe and stay warm.